Part number 1, Introduction. Anyone who can read Freud's interpretation of a dream without scientific rebellion at the newness and apparently unjustified daring of its analytical presentation, without moral indignation at the astonishing nudity of a dream interpretation, and who can allow this unusual array of facts to influence his mind calmly and without prejudice, will surely be deeply impressed at that place where Freud calls the mind the fact that an individual psychological conflict, namely the incest fantasy, is the essential root of that powerful ancient dramatic material, the Oedipus legend. The impression made by this simple reference may be likened to that wholly peculiar feeling which arises in us. For example, in the noise and tumult of modern street, we should come across an ancient relic, the Corinthian capital of a walled-in column of a fragment of inscription. Just a moment ago we were given over to the noisy ethereal life of the present, when something very far away and strange appears to us, which turns our attention to things of another order. A glimpse away from the incoherent multiplicity of the present to a higher coherence in history. Very likely it would suddenly occur to us that on this spot where we now run busily to and fro, a similar life and actively prevailed 2,000 years ago in somewhat other forms. Similar passions moved mankind, and man was likewise convinced of the uniqueness of his existence. I could liken the impression which the first acquaintance with the monuments of equinety to easily leave behind to that impression which Freud's reference to the Oedipus legend makes, for while we are still engaged with the confusing impressions of the variability of the individual soul, suddenly there is opened a revelation of the simple greatness of the Oedipus tragedy, the never extinguished light of a Grecian theatre. This breadth of outlook carries in itself something of revelation. For us, the ancient psychology has long since been buried among the shadows of the past. In a schoolroom, one could scarcely repress a sceptical smile when one indiscreetly reckoned the comfortable matrony age of Penelope and the age of Jocasta, the comically compared result of a reckoning with the tragic erotic struggles in the legend and drama we did not know at that time, and who knows even today, that the mother can be all-consuming passion of a son, which perhaps undermines his whole life and tragically destroys it, so that not even the magnitude of the Oedipus fate seems one jot overdrawn. Rare and pathologically understood cases like Nina de Longclis and her son lie far too removed from most of us to give a living impression. But when we follow the paths traced out by Freud, we arrive at a recognition of present existence of such possibilities, which, although they are too weak to enforce incest, are still strong enough to cause disturbances of a considerable magnitude in the soul. The admission of such possibility to oneself does not occur without a great burst of moral revolution. Resistances arise which only too easily dazzle the intellect, and through that made knowledge of self impossible. Whenever we succeed, however, in stripping feelings from more scientific knowledge, then that abyss which separates our age from the antique is bridged, and with astonishment we see that Oedipus is still a living thing before us. The importance of such an impression should not be undervalued. We are taught by this insight that there is an identity of elementary human conflicts existing independent of time and place. That which affected the Greeks with horror still remains true, but it is true for us only when we give up a vain illusion that we are different, that is to say, more moral than the ancients. We of the present day have nearly succeeded in forgetting that an indissoluble common bond binds us to the people of antiquity. Without this truth, a path is opened to the understanding of the ancient mind, an understanding which so far has not existed, and on one side leads to an inner sympathy, and on the other side to an intellectual comprehension. Through buried strata and of individual soul, we come indirectly into possession of the living mind of the ancient culture, and just precisely through that do we win that stable point of view outside our own culture, from which for the first time an objective understanding of their mechanisms would be possible. At least that is the hope which we get from the rediscovery of the Oedipus problem. The inquiry made possible by Freud's work has already resisted fruitfully. We are indebted to his stimulation for some bold attacks upon the territory of the history of the human mind. For our workers of Ricklin, Abraham, Rank, Meter, Jones, recently Syllabier has joined their ranks with a beautiful investigation entitled Fantasy on Myths. We are indebted to Pfister for a comprehensive work which cannot be overlooked here, and which is of most importance for Christian religious psychology. The leading purpose of these works is the unlocking of historical problems for the application of psychoanalytic knowledge, that is to say, knowledge drawn from the activity of the modern unconscious mind concerning specific historical material. I must refer the reader entirely to the specified works in order that he may gain knowledge concerning the extent, the kind of insight which has already been obtained. The explanations are in many cases dubious in particulars, nevertheless this detracts in no way from the total result. It would be significant enough if only the far-reaching analogy between the psychologic structure of the historical relics and the structure of a recent individual psychological products alone were demonstrated. This proof is possible of attainment for every intelligent person for the work done up to this time. The analogy prevails especially in symbolisms as Ricklin, Rank, Meter, and Abraham have pointed out with illuminating examples. It is also shown in the individual mechanisms of unconscious work, that is to say in repression, condensation, etc., as Abraham explicitly shows. Up to the present time, the psychoanalytic investigator has turned his interest chiefly to the analysis of the individual psychological problems. It seems to me, however, that in the present state of affairs there is a more or less imperative demand for the psychoanalyst to broaden the analysis of the individual problems by a comparative study of historical material relating to them. Just as Freud has already done in a masterly manner in his book on Leonardo da Vinci, for just as the psychoanalytic conceptions promote understanding of the historic psychological creations, so reversedly historical materials can shed new light upon individual psychological problems. These and similar considerations have caused me to turn my attention somewhat more to the historical, in the hope that out of this new insight into the foundation of individual psychology might be won.